Welcome to ILTV's main broadcast. Tonight's broadcast is sponsored by the Hebron Fund, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the unification of Israel's ancient city of Hebron.
I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Israel is believed to have carried out massive airstrikes in Syria. The IDF finally releases the identity of a young Israeli man that was stabbed to death over the weekend. And an Israeli father may have the key to detecting autism in newborn babies. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. Israel is believed to have just carried out massive airstrikes in Syria. Arab media is reporting that Israeli jets have been spotted launching missiles at an Iranian military base near Al-Kiswa and have allegedly destroyed an arms depot.
Israel, as a rule, doesn't comment on military activity like this, but Prime Minister Netanyahu has just issued a warning directly to Iran, unofficially confirming that Israel was behind the attack.
So let me reiterate Israel's policy. We will not allow a regime hell-bent on the annihilation of the Jewish state to acquire nuclear weapons. We will not allow that regime to entrench itself militarily in Syria, as it seeks to do, for the express purpose of eradicating our state.
The casualty toll is still unclear at the moment, though Arab sources say 12 Iranian militants have been killed in the blast. This Iranian base is the same one revealed by the BBC a few weeks ago, which satellite pictures show has been in the works for quite a while now. Israel believes the base is intended as a permanent foothold for Iran in the region, and clearly the army is taking all precautionary measures to make sure that doesn't happen.
Former Trump advisor Michael Flynn has pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about his contacts with Russia. And now it looks like Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, may have been the person who told Flynn to talk with the Russians regarding an anti-Israel resolution at the United Nations.
Kushner has been leading President Trump's push for Middle East peace between Israel and the Palestinians, but new turmoil suggests those plans may be in jeopardy. Word has it that President Trump will announce official U.S. recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital this week. This will be news many Israelis will be overjoyed to hear, but the Palestinians have told Kushner that if Trump makes the announcement, it will completely annihilate the White House's hopes for any peace plan. Hamas is joining this rally cry with a renewed promise of a fresh intifada terror wave if Jerusalem is indeed recognized as Israel's capital. The violence in Jerusalem this past summer was some of the bloodiest in years, but with tensions mounting as Trump prepares his statements, the world is bracing for what the fallout might be.
A 19-year-old Israeli was stabbed to death at a bus station on Thursday night, and his identity has now been cleared for publication. The teenager was an IDF soldier named Ron Yitzhak Kokia from Tel Aviv.
A 19-year-old Israeli was stabbed to death at a bus station on Thursday night, and his identity has now been cleared for publication. The teenager was an IDF soldier named Ron Yitzhak Kokia from Tel Aviv. Kokia was serving in the Nachal Brigade, which is an infantry unit that is just outside of Arad. He was reportedly waiting for a ride at a bus stop near Arad's shopping mall on Thursday night when he was fatally attacked by multiple assailants. Medics rushed to the scene at around 9:30 p.m., but he was already in critical condition and pronounced dead before they could even make it to the hospital. Kokia has now been promoted posthumously to sergeant. His murder is being considered a terror attack by Israeli security forces. Meanwhile, the Palestinians have just laid 48-year-old Mahmoud Odeh to rest at a funeral attended by hundreds. Odeh was shot and killed by an Israeli settler after a mob of Palestinians allegedly attacked a group of children who were on a hike through the West Bank. That death is currently under investigation, and clearly the violence is leaving heavy scars on both sides of this conflict.
Massive protests have erupted in the streets of Tel Aviv. Tens of thousands have gathered to condemn the government's controversial new bill, which would block police from recommending criminal indictments to the Attorney General. Now, ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is here with the details. Brett, why are picketers calling this rally the March of Shame?
Thanks, Natasha. Well, this rally is part of an ongoing series of demonstrations against Netanyahu ever since 2 corruption scandals first broke out against him, suggesting possible criminal misconduct. Now, the Prime Minister, of course, has denied any wrongdoing, but it's the timing of this new bill, which comes amidst 2 police probes into Netanyahu's alleged corruption, that this rally is really focusing on here. Now, we've just learned that Netanyahu himself has ordered a rewrite in the bill, which means that it won't apply to his current investigations. But with the final vote set for tomorrow, many Israelis are still rallying against it.
And how are things looking in the Knesset right now? Is this bill expected to pass?
I'd say right now it's looking very likely, yeah. This bill had a lot of trouble leading up to the committee vote, even within Netanyahu's own party. But with the way Netanyahu's formed the coalition, even members who may not fully support the bill are likely going to give it the green light. Just yesterday, Ayelet Shaked said she would vote for the bill, even though she's been very vocally against it leading up to now. So this will definitely be a major vote no matter what happens, as you'll see now in my report. Some 20,000 Israelis have flooded the streets of Tel Aviv, rallying against the government's controversial new recommendations bill and condemning what they see as an ongoing culture of corruption within Netanyahu's administration.
On Monday, in the Knesset, in the parliament, there is this voting about the law that will actually castrate the police force and not enable them to do their job, and be able to and allow the crooked politicians actually to hide all the things that are done there without any public transparency. So we're here to protest, hoping that we got as many people to let them know that we will not shut up.
The Prime Minister is now directing the bill to be rewritten specifically so that it won't apply to the investigations he's currently under. But many still see it as an obvious attempt to shield politicians from possible fallout of indictments, since it would outlaw the police from publishing the results of their findings. In another ironic twist, police have just questioned Netanyahu's closest ally, David Bitan, under suspicion of taking bribes in connection to a massive fraud bust. At least 17 government members of the Rishon LeZion city municipality have been arrested as part of that investigation. With opinion in both the Knesset and the Israeli public still fiercely divided over this bill, tomorrow's vote will undoubtedly be a major turning point in the country's politics.
Today, there are over 1.4 million people with disabilities that live in Israel, about 17% of the population. Now, over 700,000 of these people are of working age, but finding employment isn't always so simple for them. Joining us now is attorney Michal Feinberg, an expert in labor law and a partner at N. Feinberg & Co. And she's here to tell us about how Israeli law plans on changing that. Thank you so much for coming in. So let's begin. Thank you. So let's begin with kind of just talking about what qualifies as a disability in the first place.
First of all, the Equal Rights to People with Disability Act determines that employers should not discriminate an employee or candidate based on his disability in hiring, in promotion, in working conditions, and in termination, and also in social benefits. But this obligation not to discriminate is as long as the employee or candidate are qualified for the job. As you asked, the definition of a disability is very broad according to the law. The law defines a person with disability as a person with either physical or mental disability, whether it is permanent or temporary, due to which his functioning is substantially limited in one or more of the major life aspects. So it's a very broad definition.
Right. So and there is law, like you said, that exists right now to deal with the employment of people with disabilities, but there's now a new extension order. So tell us about that.
The extension order actually obliges companies or entities that employs more than 100 people to employ 3% of its workforce with disabled employees.
Interesting.
And also the employer, according to this extension order, should appoint a person who is responsible for the employment of people with disability in the workplace. So the major goal is to promote affirmative action in the workplace, which means to issue a program of promoting those candidates or employees who have disabilities. For example, employers can get in touch with different placement organizations and associations specializes in this area.
Very interesting. Well, Michal, thank you so much for joining us and telling us about this. It's obviously a very important issue, and it's good to see that Israel is, creating some legislation to actually deal with this. And as an expert in labor law, I'm sure you're going to be dealing with a lot of cases like this. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Israel was all set to exhibit the covered Dead Sea Scrolls in Frankfurt, Germany next year. Unfortunately, though, that exhibition has just been canceled because Germany wouldn't guarantee the return of the scrolls to Israel if either Jordan or the Palestinians claim them for their own. The dispute lays in the fact that part of the scrolls were originally found in a part of the West Bank in 1946, which has been under Israeli control since the victory of the Six-Day War. Jordan claims that Israel allegedly stole some of the scrolls from one of their museums during the war. The scrolls, however, are among some of the most significant relics of the Jewish faith. They contain mostly Hebrew writing and date back to the time of the Second Temple period. They are believed to be the second oldest known surviving manuscripts of works which would later appear in the Hebrew Bible. Israel proudly displays the Dead Sea Scrolls in Jerusalem's Israel Museum and actually loaned them to Germany 12 years ago, commemorating 40 years of friendship between Israel and Germany. A friendship that now feels a bit soured since the German government won't promise to return the scrolls this time around. More and more companies are susceptible to cyber attacks than ever, and joining us now to discuss the pressing issue is Itai Glick, the CEO of Votiro. Thank you so much for coming in. Now, Itai, let's start out by focusing on cyber threats with Uber, more specifically. The driving service had a massive global breach of personal information. 57 million customers and drivers were affected. Can you tell us what happened there?
Well, it seems that what happened in Uber is that they have been putting their password in some kind of form, and somebody got access to the form, to the GitHub form.
Yeah.
And from there, he got into their database by using the credentials that are already there.
Which is crazy. And this database is massive. I mean, like I said, 57 million people. So the question is, how were they even susceptible to such a major hack,
Well, I think that they haven't done the right practices. They haven't put two-factor authentication or IP protection on the login to the database, which could have solved their problem rather easily.
Right.
So this was the easy example. Other things is, of course, to have better cybersecurity policies like password changing for the database and things like that would assist that. And last, they could have used encryption in the database. So even if somebody got in to that database, it would be able not to receive anything from it because everything is encrypted.
Well, it seems so basic, right? What you're saying, yet that wasn't happening with such a large company, and so many people's information was essentially threatened, right? So what do you think that companies should be doing right now to tackle this issue? You gave some examples right now in your response, but are there some broader suggestions that you have?
I think that organizations should put more emphasis on their cyber position and what are the security in place, hire the right persons to check their cyber policies, and because the people that have done that didn't want to do bad to the company, they was just doing the business side. But at the business, you need to take care of cyber as well and put the protection in place.
Absolutely, especially in this world that we're living in right now. Everything is on the internet.
Yes, and there are new regulations coming in, like the GDPR and some regulation in the US also, which would emphasize that you need to disclose any breach. Because in Uber case, they didn't disclose the breach at all.
Which was probably, one of the main reasons that also made international news so heavily. All right, well, Itai, thank you so much for coming in and telling us about how we should protect ourselves. Businesses, keep his advice in mind, right?
Thank you.
Today's newscast is sponsored by the Hebron Fund. Stay tuned for a short message from today's sponsor and log on to www.hebronfund.org or call 718-677-6886 to join the 24-hour celebration.
Hebron is the second holiest site in the land of Israel. There, Abraham and Sarah are buried along with many other biblical figures. The Hebron Fund dedicates itself to making sure Hebron is accessible, enjoyable, and livable. Join me, Yishai Fleischer, as I give you the taste of the spirit of Hebron, and join our 24-hour all-or-nothing fundraising campaign to help make Hebron open, Jewish, and a place for everyone. Previews online at hebronfund.org.
Well, IsraAid is one of the most amazing humanitarian organizations on the planet, sending Israeli aid to countries in crisis all over the world. Now, this amazing group is working with South Sudan and opening the country's first ever school for science, technology, engineering, and math. Talk about amazing work. IsraAid has been in South Sudan for years now, helping the country get back on its feet following years of bloody unrest and civil war. As is often the case, it's the children who have probably suffered the most, many of them being left without families, formal education, or any hope for a bright future. That's why IsraAid has enlisted help from all over the world to open this brand new school for South Sudanese youth. At least 10,000 students are expected to enroll in the Advanced Center over the next 3 years, bringing critical education to the African nation's next generation of leaders and thinkers. This will be the first time any of these students will ever be able to explore advanced chemistry, math, physics, and computing. So who knows how many dreams will be born from this, or how many future engineers, architects, and doctors may have just found their calling. Keep up the good work, guys. All right, now an Israeli father has spent the last 30 years developing a way to detect autism in newborns after his 4-year-old son was diagnosed with autism. And now his revolutionary new system called Sense PD is finally headed for clinical trials.
By the time Rafi Rembrandt's son was diagnosed, it was already too late for most autism therapies. That's because until now, the condition is usually detected from abnormalities in children's behavior. But scientists also believe autism is connected to the ability to filter sensory information, which is why people with autism generally experience symptoms of sensory overload. That's where Rembrandt's new detection system comes in. Sensory perception is relayed through a small mechanism in the inner ear, which is why Sense PD works like a basic ear exam. Technology used for newborn hearing tests is instead used to measure sensory perception, which in turn can be studied to determine if these sensory filters may have problems that could result in autism. Rembrandt's revolutionary new idea is now heading for joint clinical trials in the United States and Israel. It may have taken him 3 decades, but it looks like this proud father's work is finally about to pay off and help millions all over the world.
We all know what it's like to sit in back-to-back traffic and just wish we could fly above it all. Well, a new Israeli company is trying to turn that daydream into a reality by building a fleet of electric airplanes that can serve as our new form of regional transportation. Just imagine a trafficless highway in the sky. Well, joining us now is the CEO and co-founder of Aviation Aircraft to tell us more. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I'm very excited about this interview because this is a unique startup that you have going for yourself. Tell us about what your company does.
Okay, so Aviation Aircraft builds a regional commuter aircraft that can take 9 passengers, fly 1,000 kilometers between charges, and be all electric. Now, being all electric really makes it quiet, clean, but also, and most importantly in transportation, cheap. So it's doable in today's kind of financial environment. You can really be competitive with today's ground transport.
Which is, okay, so talk to us a little bit about how this would impact the aviation industry as it is right now.
That's a good question, because when we think of aviation industry, we usually think about going into a billion-dollar facility, standing in line, taking our shoes off. The whole idea is to make it different. We want to take passengers from ground transport, from the buses, from the cars, from that terrible traffic that you talked about, and really give us an opportunity to use all of these small airfields and get from point A to point B, point A.
So you know, obviously these planes would not be flying, I think what you said, more than 1,000...
1,000 kilometers.
Okay, very interesting. And they hold 9 people, right? So what would the cost per person be like if you were taking...
That's exactly the point. Because it's electric, because of the low cost of energy, but most importantly, because of the low cost of maintenance. If you will, you've seen a lot of cars stuck by the side of the road, but when have you ever seen a refrigerator stuck by the side of the kitchen? You don't really maintain these things, they just work. So the cost reductions are very dramatic, and we're talking about an expected cost per seat per kilometer that's an equivalent to a taxi or a train, depending on where you go from.
But then, I mean, then how many of these planes do you need in the sky, right?
Because that's actually a good question, because a lot of the things that we talk about today with the autonomous cars and all the effects that sharing economies have on us, like Uber, that makes you own the seat for a while, or Airbnb, that makes you rent the house or the room for a while, really has already happened in aviation, and this is what we do anyway. And we believe that with roughly 1,000 aircraft, we can probably take on about 10% of the regional transportation in a country like Israel.
That's unbelievable. So my final question for you is, what kind of environmental impact would a plane like this essentially have?
One of the things we don't think about is the environmental impact of aviation generally. If you will, 20% of the liquid fuels that are used in Israel today and in most modern economies actually go for aviation, are used for aviation. That's a lot. That's a big number. So the ability to do this with centralized or let's say energy that's manufactured in a centralized place really reduces the use of liquid fuels, of fossils in general, fossil fuels, and of course reduces the CO2 emissions that relate to transportation, which are very significant.
Unbelievable. Well, this is, I'm obviously flabbergasted because this is just really incredible to hear about, and I'm excited to see what the timeline is for when these are going to come out. I mean, it's not
kind of aggressive, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we have.
We are building the full-scale aircraft as we speak.
Okay.
We expect it to fly within the 2018 timeframe, showing it off at the next Paris Air Show in mid-2019, and then go into the market.
That's actually sooner than I thought. All right, well, I'm excited to see the day that I'm going to be traveling in one of these guys. Thank you so much for coming in, Omer.
Thank you for having us.
Well, we like to think that the Israeli comedy scene is out of this world hilarious. A little bit of American humor in the Holy Land just can't hurt. The Comedy for Kobe tour is here in Israel, and ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh is here with the details.
Hi, Natasha. Yes, well, this will be the 20th tour under the Comedy for Kobe belt, and it's been nonstop cracking people up since its debut in 2008. Living here in Israel, I sometimes miss the American humor, the stand-up comics dish back in the States. So I'm actually pretty excited. Hopefully I'll get tickets in time.
Now, if you find some, get me a ticket too. It's actually not only a comedy show, right?
Right.
There's a foundation that's linked to the tour?
Right, yes. Okay. The Kobe Mandel Foundation is directly linked with the comedy tour. All the proceeds go and help an extremely important cause and very sensitive, especially here in Israel, but I'll give you all the details in my report.
I'm Israeli myself, by the way. I was born in Israel, Nahariya. And on behalf of all Israelis, a quick apology on behalf of all Israelis. If one more Israeli tries to sell me a Dead Sea product at a mall, I'm going to blow my brains out. I can't take it anymore. I can't deal with it. Because they haven't really learned the American sales technique, right? They insult you and then try to sell you the product, right? It's like, hey, your face looks like I help you out. I help you. But you mad at me, I'm mad at you. Go away. I don't sell you nothing. I don't want to talk to you.
So, comedian Avi Lieberman may have the right idea about Israeli mentality in the States, but it's not all just fun and games. In a time when every act of kindness makes a difference, the Comedy for Kobe tour heads to the Holy Land to brighten up people's lives while also raising money for a very important cause. The comedy tour brings some of America's most hilarious comedians right here to Israel, all in one place. And get this. All ticket sale proceeds go straight to supporting those who have suffered the loss of a loved one, as well as victims of terror. The Comedy for Kobe tour, which started in 2008, has been paving the way for countless American comics to perform here in Israel. This year, Avi Lieberman hosts and opens the floor, introducing 3 new names to the Israeli stage: Tammy Piscatelli, DC Benny, and Don McMillan. Lieberman's been busting guts in clubs all over the world and even on late-night TV, but he founded Comedy for Kobe in the first place to support an important cause. Quote, I take considerable pride knowing that these comics, many of who have negative impressions about Israel from media reports, are able to go back to the US and understand that this is really a great country with great people, says Lieberman. The Comedy for Kobe tour is just getting started this week, so get your tickets and get ready to laugh out loud.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. They say the best path through life is the highway, so today's word is kvish meir, which means, you guessed it, highway in Hebrew. Now, every Israeli likes to think that it's their way or the highway, but what's so wrong with the kvish meir? After all, taking the highway is also an analogy for rising above all of the people that annoy you. In Hebrew, though, kvish meir is a formal way of saying highway. Israelis like to refer to the highway as just kvish. Now, there aren't that many major highways here in Israel. All you have to do, if you're asking for directions, is refer to them by number, like where's kvish 6 or highway 6. Believe me, Israel's a small country. Israelis will know where to lead you. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight, the skies will be clear and the temperatures will be unseasonably warm with a low of about 58 or 14 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow is expected to be clear to partly cloudy and with an additional rise in temperatures to a high of about 79 or 26 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.49 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at ILTV.tv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.